What's going on? Welcome back to another AI Marketing Stacks podcast. And I'm here today. I actually should have asked this question before we hit record, but I'm with Brian, something last name. How do you say your last name?
Czekanski.
Czekanski. Okay, that's not so bad. So I'm here with Brian Czekanski, and I'm gonna have him kind of introduce who he is and what he does.
Cool. So Brian Czekanski, affiliate manager, email copywriter, CRO copywriter, Facebook ad copywriter for Natural Health Sherpa, also called Metabolic. So been there a little over a year, and I've been kind of a copywriter going back a little bit further than 5 years now. So before I became a copywriter, worked a little over a decade in financial sales. So was kind of looking for a transition to get out of sales and kind of stumbled into the copywriting world. Didn't really know what a copywriter was, but happy to say kind of long journey of getting to, happy to say, at Natural Health Sherpa, 8-figure company. Yeah, we make more than 7 figures in terms of email revenue and profit, and certainly a great opportunity that I've been in for, like I said, a little over a year now. So
Awesome. And the reason why I wanted to bring you on, I mean, there's a bunch of different reasons, but two in particular is with Natural Health Sherpa, you have so much access to data and the split testing protocols and the way that you guys record data and look it over and really have your hands in it is really, really powerful because a lot of companies don't report accurately or have trouble with that. But you guys have both the scale and all the systems in place to measure that. So that's really, really helpful to pay attention to what's working, what sort of changes have you made. The other thing is that, we've talked a lot about using AI, and I know that you've been using AI in your workflow. And, not only have you used it in your workflow, but you have measurable outcomes, like it saved you time, it's allowed you to make more. And we'll get into that in a second. But just for everyone listening, that's really one of the main reasons I wanted to bring you on here. And before we get into the AI stuff, I kind of want to ask you, what are you working on right now in the marketing field in email that has you most excited or you're most interested in right now?
yeah, I think it, I've gone to, like, I think when I first got introduced to AI, it was kind of probably Stefan's 6-hour sales letter, which was, I feel like it was more than a year. Like, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but it feels like it was about a year ago,
Yeah.
or it was a little bit longer than that. But it was just, I think for me, that was, that kind of introduced me to like the possibilities, because you obviously talk to a lot of people like, like AI and things like that. Like, what do I have to use? Like, how am I going to use this? But I think Stefan in that training kind of just showed me the possibilities. And like, I feel like over that time period, I've kind of just gone through kind of that normal flow. So like the example that I always use is I started jujitsu about 2 years ago. And you kind of, like in the first few weeks, you're just trying to kind of survive and figure things out. And it was kind of very similar for AI, where I was kind of just, the great use case was like I was just using it for research, and I got really excited about it. You get the high, and then after a while you're just like, I feel like I'm spending more time using AI than just kind of writing stuff. So you kind of hit that valley of like, yeah. And I would do that. I would, every so often I'd be like, I need to put AI to the side because it's costing me so much time to do it. But
Sure.
you kind of learn that over, like, I guess the dream scenario I'm trying to work towards is like, okay, can AI help me cut my workflow in half by giving me kind of, I think one of the things that you have certainly taught me is kind of the influence of kind of structure. So like looking at the emails that have worked for us in Sherpa, but also looking at ClickBank swipes and things like that, kind of realizing that it's not only the copy on the page, but the way that you say it, like the way that it's kind of expressed. That's the way I always kind of saw it in terms of like presentation styles and things like that. But it's also really important in the written word, and kind of analyzing that, the style, the tone, the voice makes all the difference. And again, as we do testing, like a good email, the difference between a good email and something that I can't really use could be the difference between 1 or 2 words. And it doesn't even have to be in that first sentence. And that's what I've kind of realized, especially for specific audiences. Once you get, into, I guess to go back to your question, long-winded answer to get to your question is like Von Helbert has obviously those power words that you think about. And I've gotten to the point where it's like, it's almost like the conversion words within specific emails, where it's like, okay, if I include these 1 or 2 words in there, along with the benefit statements, along with the CTA, and all those are working, that's the difference between an email that crushes versus one that doesn't. And that's kind of like pulled back the curtain for me. And again, AI was a way for me to kind of figure that out and look at structure and kind of analyze those things. But like it makes a huge difference now. Now I have like these lists of words that I know I have to use, and like it's almost like a thesaurus that I can go to. It's like, okay, here's my conversion word that I need to use every time, and that just increases my probability of winning, keeping performance consistent. So like that's been a huge breakthrough for me, and it just came through just playing around with AI and being able to like analyze emails saying like AI, what's the style, what's the tone, what's the structure that you're using here, and just having kind of that independent eye of looking at that. So
That's awesome. What are some of the power words or the conversion words that you go to most often?
I think it kind of depends on the audience. So like for me, it's a really specific like female 55, like going through like weight loss issues. Like, for example, I was writing like a manifestation emails like a week ago. And I think it's, like as I went through those, it's just a little bit something different. So it kind of ties into like what are the problem areas, what are those benefit statements, those kind of things. But it a lot of times it's just bringing a little bit more emotion, kind of ramping up um like what they're talking about. So like like for example, like in terms of like a specific food that you might be talking about, maybe like a fear angle in terms of their metabolism, and saying like instead of saying this is going to hurt your metabolism, saying this is going to wreck your metabolism. So just that one word, wreck, for whatever reason with my list, that just like that kind of jars them, like awake, and they're more receptive to that solution that's coming down, before that CTA. So again, it's like really like word, like if I gave you the words, you wouldn't even look at them and be like these are the words that are leading to conversions, but it's really specific to that audience. In some way it kind of jars them awake of like, wow, like this is a little bit more emotional. But again, we've tested it enough times that I know it has like statistical significance. And again, I think it's a little bit more buyer specific in
Yeah.
that if you share specific stories, if you share certain verbiage, like one of the other things that AI has really helped me in terms of like just describing like specific problems. So if I'm talking about belly fat, like how can I describe belly fat in a different way? Like to again just kind of visceral, like to get that emotional reaction from them to get to the point where they're looking for conversion. So like whether it's metaphors or analogies or those kind of things, make a huge difference. And like again, you're just not starting from a blank page. You're just like, AI, can you give me 20 variations, and maybe the variations don't lead to what I want, but they give me inspiration to maybe find that one that I was looking for. So
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And that's one of the reasons why I like talking with you is again what I said at the start is you have a platform where you can actually test and say, all right, using rec versus hurt actually makes a difference because it's fun to kind of like sit around and think about like, oh, these power words and kind of be a copy nerd.
yep.
But very few people actually have the opportunity to see how specific words that are more emotionally charged can make such a big difference. So it's always cool to be like, no, like this has statistical significance that just swapping out these specific words makes a big difference. And, to piggyback on that, which, I'll probably try to include some of this in the show notes, is some things that you share with me is when you're looking at some of the biggest wins that you've had, a lot of it is it's pretty simple stuff, like kind of par for the course copy stuff. But again, it was really cool to see how changing, for instance, I think you, if I remember correctly, you can correct me if I'm wrong, um, work focusing on the first sentences, right? So the way that emails start, focusing on the dimensionalized benefits. And I think not just making the benefits more dimensionalized or visual or realistic, but really trying to get those accurate. So modifying those so they really paint the right picture. That was one. The other one I think you said that you test a lot is the naming conventions, right? So the names that you give, which kind of piggybacks on using the power words. Is there anything else that I'm leaving out? Are those correct?
Yeah, I mean, all those are like all those are like I think I guess one other example I'd throw it in there is just one of them kind of talks about like what you talked about is like just like kind of almost having like that insider language. Like there's certain words that are going to really resonate with their audience. They know they're in the right place. Like to give you an example, like when I first started at Sherpa, like I didn't have a ton of success because I was kind of using language like again, I'm almost like a 40-year-old male talking to a 55-year-old woman. So like like we're both speaking English, but they're, like they're speaking a different version of that. So like I was either using not the right words that they would describe it as, or I was using verbiage in there that they was just like unconsciously they were being thrown off by, because it's not, it's not how they would describe things. It's not how they would use things, and things like that. So like another tool, like in addition to AI, like what I do is I read all the magazines that they read. So like I have a Women's World, I have all these women's magazines that my wife is bringing into the apartment every day. Like, why do we have a subscription to this? Because it's just like, okay, like I can use those front cover like blurbs as great inspiration. And I can tell you in the last few weeks, I've taken like little blurbs from Women's World and things like that, use them as inspiration, and gotten really great like first sentence wins or subject line wins or from name wins. It's, something I learned from Randall Pruitt in Genesis and Copy Accelerator. Like, okay, just always be feeding, kind of feeding your brain of like, and having that viewpoint of your audience. Like, what are they looking at? What are people saying? Like, what's resonating with them? And what are you seeing over and over again? And again, like always be testing and seeing what works. There's plenty of stuff that like I fail in testing all the time, but it's those kind of key threads that you see that, it's just like, okay, I've got a win here. I can use that again. I can use that again. And you just keep on using it until, it doesn't work. So that's a huge benefit.
Yeah, that's awesome. The other thing that, and I also am a Woman's World stan for weight loss copy, because I just love, actually, whenever I do weight loss anything, I just go and look at a bunch of the covers, because it's the same formula, right? Here's this new way that I burned this amount of fat in this amount of time, and then there's stuff around energy, pain relief, recipes. It's pretty interesting to see that formula work over and over and over again, and again, the language itself. The other thing that you did that I really admire is, AI is great, and there will undoubtedly, and there already are, tons of softwares that will help you to interact with the tool in better ways, right? But at the end of the day, every single person has their own specific workflow, right? So for example, you're writing a very specific kind of copy, in a very specific niche, in a very specific style. So a lot of times what we're trying to teach and train people in Genesis is not just here's a prompt or here's this, because it's amazing, but helping you, giving you the tools for how can you develop a workflow that's specific to you. And that's one thing that you did. And I'll try to include some resources for the listeners to check it out. But basically on one of the trainings that we did, it was about, hey, create a database. Let's say you're doing email copy, create a database of different kinds of email. So a UMP email that talks about the mechanism, or a benefit email, or a testimonial email, right? Or a contrarian email. And I gave some different examples of those. But what you did is you took it a step further. You looked at your winning emails and created, I think, like 20 different types, maybe more at this point, of different
Yep.
emails and structures that you follow. And now you have your own database with what I imagine are prompts and swipes and templates that allow you to just churn out tons of different copy that gives you a starting point to make those tests and those tweaks and edit it. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been an important part, is like almost like finding your voice with like how I speak to AI is not going to be the way Mario speaks to AI, not the way that you speak to AI, like Stefan speaks to AI. So like I think I kind of bring it back to like when I first started as a copywriter. Like when you first start, you have no idea what you're doing. So you just find like, okay, these mentors, like these people that have tended to figure out, and like, okay, like in terms of like finding new clients, I'm just going to copy what they did, and kind of learn after a while, like that's not a good, like that's not a good way of doing it. You kind of have to figure out what works for you, like your unique personality, what you like doing, and things like that. So it's been very similar in terms of like AI. Like when I was first starting with it, I was just kind of taking the prompts that you guys shared, tweaking it around and things like that, and didn't really understand, like especially in terms of like the Mario prompts and templates, like, okay, like why did he include this one sentence? Why did it, like, what's the importance of that? And it wasn't until like I kind of just used it more and more in terms of like, okay, like one sentence in your prompt can make the difference between a really good output and not, and just figuring out like, okay, like what are the bullets that make sense for me to include, and how can I describe it in my own words to AI to get the output that I'm looking for. There's plenty of times where you put this great prompt in there, and and you don't get the output you're looking for, and then you go back to edit it and it's like, okay, like what can I tell AI to get the response that I'm looking for in terms of just like instead of spinning my wheels. So like I think that's been a big part for me is you kind of start with like, okay, I'm gonna I'm gonna take what the experts are doing. You kind of go through that repetition of seeing what works, what doesn't work, and kind of tweaking that. I think that's good, like from definitely from you and definitely from Mario in terms of like the structure and like what are the prompts, what are those key areas, and then kind of just making it my own in terms of like, and it's kind of shown me the value of like what like eventually AI might take over for like in terms of writing all the copy and all that kind of stuff, but I still have value in terms of especially looking at the prompts in terms of like I have to bring in the swipes and templates that they use. I have to be able to describe for AI why we're like what's like the marketing context to get to the output that I'm so like definitely over the last weeks and months it's like okay, like here's the value that I can bring even if AI takes over and becomes the copywriter of the world. Like here's the value that I have and here's the specific areas of those prompts. And I think that's been like, again, I've kind of gone through that journey of like, I hate AI, I love AI, but you can see the power of it and how you can kind of fit into that even as AI gets more and more powerful. You still have value in that. So like I think that's been very empowering for me, but also seeing that way forward. Like just all the stuff in your head can be super helpful just in communicating with AI and getting the outputs that you're looking for.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what would you recommend um what would you recommend to someone like to try something that you found very effective when either interacting with ChatGPT or Midjourney or any of these other tools? What would you recommend to somebody else who wants to get the maximum value from using these tools, save time, be more efficient, be more effective?
Yeah, I think like I think you one of the things like again, I got it from Misha, who's one of the coaches in Genesis. Like, okay, like if you're writing an email, if you're writing an email for a client, go into AI. It doesn't mean like maybe after the deadline or before the deadline, whatever it is, like go into AI and try and do the same thing and see if you can get an output from AI to do that. And I think that's been super powerful. Like again, I've gotten into periods where I don't want to do that because it creates a lot of time. But think about it. You're almost kind of like training new writers to work under you. So you're going to have to put in some investment. You're going to have to put in some training into that. But eventually, again, those kind of learnings, and as you test things out, you're going to figure out like, okay, like this one tweak to this one sentence in the prompt got me a better output in terms of what I was looking for. So like whatever you're working on copywriting wise, try and replicate that on AI. Maybe you don't use that AI copy that comes out, that's fine. But just through that repetition, that consistency, once a day, just try and hop into ChatGPT or whatever you're using and just work like, again, just that daily habit of like, okay, I'm going to spend 15 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever it is, and just do that consistent things. And you're going to just pick up certain things. And again, for me, over the last few weeks, it's just like, if I like your way of communicating with AI will just kind of develop in a way that'll make it a lot more seamless. You'll get the outputs that you're looking for and those kind of things. And don't, I've had a lot of breakthroughs. Like I spend most of my time on email, but I've tried advertorials, I've tried leads, I've tried headlines, like just play around with stuff that you might not have client work for, or, like is not immediate, like test out some of those structures. Like again, using some of the structures that Mario provided from a lead perspective, I've been able to use that for advertorials. I've been able to use that I used it for an email today. It just gave me a better understanding of like prompt engineering and outputs and how to use certain swipes to get the outputs that you're looking for. So just be open to, again, testing and evaluating and just carving out maybe a portion of your day or a portion of your week to just, again, just testing out things that might not be the output that you're looking for, but in the process of just being consistent with it, you're going to get breakthroughs.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that. I think that's all really, really good. So where can people, what's something that you want to share with either our audience, or where can people find out more about you or connect with you if they have questions?
Yeah, so like one of the things that I guess I used to be big on is kind of like teaching what you know, like showing your work, teaching what you know. I haven't been that great about it since I've been at Chirpa, just because I've been kind of heads down, but it's something that I'm going to be particularly over the next few weeks, just doing a little bit more on just, things from a marketing perspective, just showing ads that I've been looking at, swipes I've been looking at. So if you just check me out on YouTube, just type in my full name, you should be able to find my channel, and I can make sure you have that link as well in the show notes. And I'm going to be more consistent with that in the next few weeks. So just again, you'll see a little bit more about like the ads that I'm looking at, the research that I'm doing, some of the client projects, and how I'm doing research and how I'm incorporating AI. Like one of the things that I've learned is like the best way to learn is to teach what you know. So I feel like that's going to accelerate my AI knowledge a little bit better in terms of just like seeing like, okay, like what are some of those inputs that I'm probably not going to go into like specific prompts or anything like that, but just kind of the inputs that are going into like before I get to ChatGPT, what am I using? What am I seeing in the world? And again, just kind of thinking out loud a little bit more.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely make sure to link all that in the show notes. And yeah, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing everything. And I'm sure we'll probably have you back on at some point in the future.
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right, man.